Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Survivor 50 Wishlist Podcast, an off-season series where we're trying to figure out who could and should come back for the upcoming season of Survivor 50. Here we are talking about the last non-winner returnee season of Survivor, period. And who knows, maybe Survivor 50 will be the next instance of that. So we're on paper, we'd have a lot to look back on in terms of who are the people they brought on and what was the general theming that they used. That's the good news. The bad news is it happens to be Survivor Game Changers, what I would say is one of the oddest themes, not only in Survivor
Oddest
history.
was Blood versus Water.
It was close, though, a few years off, but in reality TV history in general. But of course, I'm not alone. That melodious voice you just heard is someone who has been joining me for a good amount of these returning seasons. Actually, though, not since All Stars. We had Steven come on for Heroes versus Villains. We had Peridium on for Cambodia, but Rob Cesternino, it was your turn again at the ship wheel because there is a shipwreck theme to Game Changer, something maybe we should have saw as a bit of a sign in hindsight. But here we are, Game Changer to the medium itself, talking about Survivor Game Changers.
Yeah, Mike, thank you for having me back. Very fun to get to talk about all this stuff with you again. Incredible job that you've been doing. What a fun summer it's been to go through all of this. And, looking back as like we've talked about, like, my Survivor career earlier, and we got into that certainly more in Survivor All-Stars. Looking back, I do think that my best chance to ever play a third time, I think, was here in this season, Survivor Game Changers.
Okay, so I'm so glad you mentioned this because I didn't want to necessarily put the cart before the horse too much. But in the research I do, especially with these returning seasons, what we like to do is go through the cast, talk about what was sort of the mood at the time, why were these people picked, etc. And then I usually like to go through a list that at least the Reddit detectives have compiled as to people that were considered or cut, declined. I happen to see that on a list of people considered for Survivor Game Changers that allegedly one Rob Cesternino declined the offer. Can you confirm or deny this?
Yeah, I can confirm it. So it was, I think, so I remember it was probably like January 2016.
Right, because it would have filmed that summer in summer 2016.
And I remember they called me, and my younger son, Anthony, had just been born in November of 2015, and they called me. And, Steven had just come off of playing on Survivor Second Chances. And they just had Steven back. And I had run into like a Survivor producer, and I remember them saying to me like, "Hey, we got Fish back. We're gonna get you." Like,
okay.
It's like, okay, it's time to pants both the know-it-alls. And
Steven had his pants around his ankles for a lot of Survivor Cambodia.
Right. So it's like, okay, sure. And I think that was at a point where, like any future reasons why that Survivor production might have been not as happy with Rob as a podcast hadn't happened yet. And so it really feels like that would have been, I think they were, like, as we'll talk about, maybe grasping for straws on some people. And so they called me. It wasn't like, hey, this is a sure thing. But they did call me, and I kind of feel like had I thrown my hat in the ring and said, yeah, I'll do it, I'm in, that I really think that this was probably, if it was ever going to happen, I think Game Changers was probably going to be it.
When you were given the call, were you told any information as to what the theme might be?
No.
Or was it just an availability, yes or no?
Just an availability of that they were doing. I really don't remember that they were doing another All-Stars, and I don't remember much more than that. I don't know what I thought at the time it was going to be, or even leading up to it. What they like, I feel like that Second Chances had been so popular, and I think they were looking to bring people back again, and that was that. And so my son was 2 months old. My wife would have killed me. We really, it's been a challenge where we don't live close to a lot of family, and so we really have just like when our kids are young, we really did not have a lot of help, and Nicole was working at the time.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like I do not know how we could have pulled it off.
Yeah, the stars weren't necessarily aligned. And I'm sure also in the moment, I mean, we're going to talk about this, that they do a returnee season a year and a half after doing a previous returnee season. And so at that pace, you probably think, and especially the way the 20s were going, right, where you basically had some form of returnees in so many of these seasons back to back, you think, oh yeah, there will probably be another chance to get asked back on whether it be a hybrid newbie, a returnee, or maybe even an all returnee. And then we see where the rest of the 30s go.
I think what I have said in the past is don't lose my number, but I think that was a pass for me.
Well, let's talk about this season in general.
The people that did go.
Exactly, because what
Actually,
I do...
Mike, may I? Because this is a season.
Do you have another hat that you're going to pull out?
No, we've brought back many legends to the game, and God. So to honor a true legend of the game. Oh my God!
How many severals of dollars did he pay you to do that?
I got some Jelinski merch recently.
Okay, nice. Is your first time repping it on pod?
Yep.
All right, well, the Jalen sky's the limit when it comes to what makes a game changer. And yeah, I mean, especially looking at the meta of all of this, we are at a time in Survivor at the point where this is occurring where when something works for the show, they almost immediately repeat it. Mm-hmm. Cagayan works, so they do basically it's spiritual sequel in Worlds Apart, and then it's literal sequel in Co Wrong. Blood versus Water works, so they do it immediately again in San Juan del Sur. Cambodia was a big deal. I talked about this with Peridium. It was, despite the fact that we had so many returnees.
Despite Peridium said it's overrated.
Exactly. Though I think he even said at one point that overrated can still mean if I think it's number 5 and you think it's number 1.
Yeah, no, so, I'm teasing.
Yeah, but I think that Cambodia went over like gangbusters at the time, and also it was the first. Yeah,
and just if you didn't listen to that podcast, I think Peridium's point, which is a good one, I feel like that the ones that hold up better on a rewatch are probably ones where there are more like personality and comedic moments, as opposed to ones that are more game.
Yeah, right, where you know the outcome. You're sort of looking for the things that you might not remember. And so I think that the show was looking to strike while the iron is hot and say, oh my God, well, this all-returning season, which we hadn't done since Heroes versus Villains, went so well. Let's go back to the well immediately. And as a result, we get Survivor Game Changers. And we talk about this all the time, especially with these themes in the 20s, and especially with the themes we're going to get into in these seasons coming up in the 30s when themes still existed, that for the vast majority of Survivor, they are going to cast first and then basically figure out a theme from there. And sometimes it relates to the cast and sometimes it doesn't. Nowhere is that more clear, to be candid, than Survivor Game Changers. Yep. And it was quite a treat, Rob, to go through some of the preseason stuff where my heart goes out to Jeff Probst to a certain extent, of him just really trying to spin some straw into gold and explain why certain people who were brought on for one reason or another define a game changer.
Game Changers probably was a weak title for the season. Going back to when we did the top 40 countdown during 2021, I did a podcast with future survivor Asia Welch and then Grace Leader. We did this for Survivor Game Changers. And I think on that podcast that we were looking at the people, like, what should the theme of this been? And I think it was inspired, and I stand by it. Survivor Game Changers should have been called Legends and Losers.
Yeah, I mean, that was a little bit of what they were working with, and we saw bear out a bit with the casting, though they didn't go all the way, as I think the rumor was that it was supposed to be like people who made the merge and the jury versus pre-mergers.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I had not ever heard that, but I feel like that you have like some like some of the all-time greats. Like, you could cast a legend season with half the people that are there, and the other half are WTF. Why are they even in a second season of Survivor?
See, that's interesting, because what I would say is I could understand, as we'll get into some of the picks, like why in a blanket returnee season they would get brought back. Either they had made an impression for one reason or another on a recent season, or maybe, as we consistently speak about on these returnee season podcasts, they check a certain aesthetic box that casting always likes to go for. It's just, again, I mean, I talked about this as well with Steven, right? That we were speaking about when it comes to putting someone like Candace on heroes versus villains. It's less so about the label of, oh, Candace is one of the 5 greatest heroes or villains that's a woman in Survivor history, and more so, hey, we want to see Candace back, and you just throw her on the season and then just sort her wherever it was. It's also interesting because there was also a good amount that was talked about behind the scenes about how the casting for this season, I mean, it is far and away the widest net that Survivor will cast with its cast. To your point, we are having so many different odds and ends of Survivor represented, all under this guise of what makes a game changer, which I think like Jeff kind of described as like, some people have made big, bold moves. Some people have played more subtly. It's basically whatever you want to make of it, but that they have either changed the game or the game has changed them, maybe in some way, shape, or form. And the result we get is mixed at best.
God bless Jeff. Like he's gonna try. You know, he's never gonna like listen. Whatever. Just like he's gonna really try to spin it.
Yeah, and I think especially there was a lot of talk, including from Jeff himself at the time, about how CBS and Survivor maybe we're not seeing eye to eye in some regards when it came to casting. Of course, the big story that Jeff has told before is that CBS was the one that was really pushing to bring Ozzy back for a 4th time. Jeff didn't necessarily need to see it. Jeff was talked in the preseason being like, Ozzy just can't win. Like he has this something in his head, this break from actually being able to win the game. And so I think he was fine kind of like writing Ozzy off into the sunset after South Pacific.
And then, but was there a postscript to that? Was he?
Yes.
Did he then say that? But then he was glad that they brought him back.
Yes, which is one reason why Ozzy ultimately made the wish list. Is that he does come back and say, "I was wrong. I am so glad that Ozzy was on the season." Though his edit may not reflect that. I mean, on the other hand, Jeff said that we had to really push CBS to put Jeff Varner back on the show. So the results we get are this cast of Survivor Game Changers, which, as we'll get into, run the gamut from people from season 7 all the way through to season 33. And, you know, it's definitely something that they were trying to infuse the theme into as well. This is, of course, as we found out very recently on one of our Summer of Survivor podcasts, the season where you can't tie the vote without it going to rocks. It's not more. I
really forgot about that.
They were trying to create kind of like a hyper gamey returnee season on the level of Survivor Cambodia. And listen, I think from a certain respect they did. I think we've talked about before how Sarah Lucina ends up playing a very impressive game, especially in the post-merge. But I think a lot of that is largely obfuscated from a bit of what are we doing here aspect when it comes to a lot of this season, unfortunately.
Yeah, can't wait to get into it.
All right, well, let's do it, shall we? Let's get into the cast of Survivor Game Changers. And I divided it up a little bit into, in true Game Changers fashion, a bit of odd hats here that we are going to try on at the Haberdasher.
Hats. Okay.
Exactly. Not odd us, odd hats. I'm going to start with our pre-Heroes versus Villains returnees, which represent 2 winners and 2 returning favorites. We have, of course, Sandra Diaz-Schwein coming back for the first time since Heroes versus Villains, which is a little surprising. I think a lot of us at the time were saying, like, Sandra, you're 2 for 2 right now. Why press your luck? But what I think is interesting is that if you look back, Rob, I think a lot of people may have gotten higher on Sandra's game after watching her in Game Changers.
Yeah, Sandra's Game Changer season, I really feel like that it's a season where, and while the results like did not go her way, like I feel like that it's a season that only enhances her legacy, especially for a 2-time winner to come back and go out pre-merge. You'd probably right to say, oof. But I feel like that just the very aggressive game that Sandra ends up playing here, I think that some people could argue that it ends up being some of Sandra's finest work. It's a little bit kind of like Ethan in Survivor All-Stars, where it's not the winning game, and I think that Sandra even shines here more than Ethan does in Survivor All-Stars, but it's a very bold game, which is really going to sort of end up being, this new second version of Sandra that we see post the anybody but me era Sandra.
Yeah, that's the thing is I think post Heroes versus Villains, despite having $2 million to her name, I think a lot of people regarded her gameplay as largely passive. And Sandra's gameplay from here on out has been incredibly active. That yes, she is someone that will sit back and like let things come to her, to your point, anybody but me. But it definitely seems like, and maybe it's because now that she knows she has this target on her no matter what, right? That now she has nowhere to hide. She has officially become a legend, the first two-time winner in Survivor history. She knows she has to get out in front rather than have the cars back her over. And so we see her immediately start getting out Tony. We see her do the whole sugar sabotage to pit JT and Michaela against each other. This is like, saying a lot for Sandra. One of Sandra's most entertaining games from this season, even though she does last half the season. Of course, next to her is Cirie returning also. Sandra's coming back for her third season. Cirie and Ozzy will be our two four-timers here. What are your thoughts about them? I mean, Ozzy, as mentioned before, has one of his, I would say, most eventful seasons in like him leading this Savai tribe, getting voted out twice and
Yeah.
then returning twice and going out as the fallen angel. Were you surprised to see him back for a fourth time on Game Changers?
I don't think I was surprised to see Ozzy end up coming back. I think Game Changers itself is probably Ozzy's least eventful season in
far and
terms
away.
of his 4 times playing the game. But I think that at this point in time, I think that this was probably like a coup to have Ozzy back for the first time since South Pacific. So you're very excited to have Ozzy here.
And what about Cirie? Because Cirie, again, laid waste to the competition in Exile Island, in Micronesia, and a little bit of an unceremonious exit. She does get idled out by the fourth person we're going to talk about basically in Heroes versus Villains. But I do think she is one of these people, and I think, again, this is why it makes the discussion so fruitful and has been since 2017, is that, like, when you think game changer, you think somebody like Cirie Fields.
Yeah, this was a great spot for Cirie to end up coming back. Of course, Cirie has the iconic games in Panama and then again in Micronesia, and then, has the one that doesn't go her way in Heroes versus Villains. And so I think it was probably important to Survivor and important to Cirie to give her like that chance to that not have be the game that she goes out on, where she goes out just a couple episodes into the season. So she ends up here and has such an interesting, unique game. I don't think she goes to Tribal Council before the merge.
No.
And that's really, if you're Cirie, I mean, you couldn't come up with a better recipe.
Yeah, that's a get out of jail free card, because that's usually due to her, and she's not a slouch in the challenges, but I do think compared to the people around her, and as she gets up there in age, I think it certainly is something that puts her the most in danger.
And especially she starts on the tribe with JT, and she's talked about as somebody who could be an early target before the merge, and then to have that, and then now Cirie gets to the merge, and then people are not looking for her at all in her seasons once she hits the merge. And so she had a real opportunity here, and very tragic circumstances with the whole advantage get in.
Though, again, if you ask her, like, she thinks of it less as a tragedy.
She's a trooper.
Yeah, she is the person who has taken it the best out of the millions of people that watched Cirie go out via
advantage getting.
Not having
Cirie says, no, not that bad. Mama Fee's toenails, that was wrong.
Which goes to show how bad those toenails were. If advantage getting did not make her flinch, but the kayak did, that says something absolutely about Big Brother punishments. Though, let's talk about the punishment Cirie faced for a brief period of time, as she was on a tribe, to your point, Nuku, for a brief portion of the game, with the fourth person that we bring back from pre-Heroes versus Villains, JT. And this is a really interesting trajectory for this guy, because he goes into Tocantins and quite literally plays the perfect game, wins unanimously, wins the final 3 immunity challenges, doesn't get a vote against him, wins the fan favorite award, probably one of the most spotless winner arcs in Survivor history. Heroes versus Villains, he comes in with a little bit of that Sandra energy, honestly, of like, all right, listen, I know I'm a hero, but like, let me get a little devious here. And so he's going to engineer a couple of interesting things in the pre-merge, and then he ends up becoming sort of the mascot of this hero-wide big move to try to bring Russell over to their side at the inevitable 5-5 split with a letter in tow. And JT is sent out because of it. He is nominated for, I can't remember, does he win the
I
dumbest
think he
move award?
does. Yeah.
So James officially loses his reign as dumbest survivor ever. So then to have him come back here 14 seasons later, in the moment, I was excited about it because of this idea of redemption of like, okay, JT's really going to show that he's capable of not making these massive blunders involving idols. And to say I was proven wrong would probably be an understatement.
Yeah, JT, I think, benefits a lot from the edit when things are going well. I think that when things aren't going well, I think you could certainly show the flaws in his game. I mean, this was exciting to have him get a chance to come back after Heroes versus Villains. It's been diminishing returns as well for JT. And I always love when you clock that in this countdown when we go through these people that it just every time they go out, it keeps getting worse. And I shudder to think what that could look like for me. But yeah, this was cool to have JT back.
Yeah, I think it was really fun, especially looking at these four, right? Again, when you think game changers, it makes sense. Sandra, first two-time winner. Suri, someone that has like influenced an entire group of people to come onto the show and get off the couch. Ozzy, maybe the most prolific challenge performer and someone that basically broke Redemption Island in South Pacific. And again, JT, the first person to ever play a perfect game. If you're trying to take game changer by the letter and the law of people who like made history, it makes sense that these four would be on here.
Okay. I get the sense this is kind of like that drawing of the horse that you like to bring out, where the horse's head is pristine so far.
All right, well, let's move on to, I don't know, the neck, the upper haunches, as it were. So this group, these are the people who played post-Heroes versus Villains and pre-Cambodia and had not returned yet.
Okay.
So we have Andrea, Malcolm, Tony, Sarah, Sierra Dawn Thomas, and Haley Ford. So we have two pairs from Caramoan, a pair from Cagayan, and a pair from Worlds Apart. Should we start with the Caramoan pair first, our three-timers and Andrea and Malcolm?
Wherever you want to start, Mike. I got a lot to say on more than a few.
Yeah, so let's start with Andrea and Malcolm here. The brother and sister turned. They don't even have the chance. Yeah, exactly. Did they find some justice, perhaps, over the course of Survivor Game Changers? Andrea, unfortunately, continuing her reign of maybe not appearing on the best Survivor seasons when it comes to, unfortunately, the quality. Not about her involvement whatsoever, but she obviously made a big cut in Survivor Redemption Island, comes back for Caramoan, has like a pretty respectable 7th place finish, but is voted out with an idol in her pocket. Game changer. I mean, she's the first woman voted out with an idol in her pocket.
And does she? Her placements are what, like 6th, 7th, 8th in her seasons? Is that right?
5, 7, 8. Because she did technically come back and kind of leapfrog.
Got it. Okay, so I've told this story before on the podcast. I maybe not recently, but at the time, Andrea was hosting on for the people.com. I'm not sure. I think that she might have been hosting the Survivor After Show. Andrea had and still has like a really great hosting career. And she was doing a Survivor segment in New York City. And I knew of the rumors of this returning player season and the people that were on it. And I had the chance. I went to New York City where they were filming this show, and this was all pre-COVID, and they did a whole big taping. And I said to Andrea, what the hell do you need this for? Well, like, why do you want to go? You're gonna go on Survivor. They're gonna get somebody in here. Like you're out of the casino. You went on Survivor. You had your fun. You got a good gig. You don't need this. Think about it, Andrea. She's like, okay, all right.
But then she heard her castmates say, "This is huge. I needed this," and she got jealous of it.
Yeah. No. And she has, correctly. And again, I was looking out for I adore Andrea. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
it
She's
was in
great.
no way like in my opinion, this was good advice. And Andrea still continued to do her hosting and did not affect her hosting career. I was also afraid for Andrea that I was worried that she would also not do well to come back. That I
Interesting.
thought that she was probably seen as a player who is, I don't want to say sneaky, but like, she's a bit of like a player who is just, I think, respected, but maybe a little feared, especially coming
Fear
off
keeps him
of
loyal. That's
yeah,
what she learned from Boston Rob.
the second time that she played and some of the circumstances around she voted out Francesca.
Mm-hmm.
And like I thought that maybe Andrea might have been coming in with like a little bit of a target on her back. And I was just like, look, you got a great thing going. What do you want to come back and do this for? She then, after the season was over, on many occasions said, like, you said, don't go back. And also I felt horrible because Andrea, who has lost a sister, she
Mm-hmm.
got she had the loved ones visit, and she talks about how what a big deal Survivor is to her family, which I did not know any of that when I tried to tell her not to participate in a third Survivor season. Andrea loves Survivor.
Yep.
She shows up when people are playing fan run Survivor games. So Andrea, I hope Andrea played. I hope you put her through, Mike, on
Oh yeah.
previous
Oh
seasons.
yeah. So yeah, we can just go through briefly here. If I suffice it to
Yeah,
say,
would love to see Andrea play again in a Legend season.
well, Sandra Sari, Ozzy, JT, all on the ballot. Andrea also on the ballot. She was one of the non-Boston, one of the two non-Boston Raw people we put through from Redemption Island. So yeah, to your point, she said as well that she is great playing whenever, wherever Survivor will need her, which is maybe a reason why
She
she
doesn't
ended up
care. Yeah.
when she ended up getting cast here as well. It's like, okay, maybe if you're casting theme first, does she fit this necessarily? Maybe not so much, but this is, a young woman from the 20s that we can always rely on to like bring some active gameplay as well. And
Yeah.
Andrea did do that to a certain extent here in Survivor Game Changers.
Yeah. And she started her Survivor career so young. Like, I'm sure she's still at a great age to play Survivor. So we'd love to see Andrea come on through. Can we talk about Malk?
Oh, we gotta talk about
Malk. And of course, Mike, famously.
Yeah, so this is the season of Malcolm where I got caught a little flat-footed with my pants down, and I had a certain reaction to the chaos of Malcolm's booth.
Can we set this up also? Because I kind of feel like that either people are listening to this podcast and they know all these stories, and they're smiling because they know the stories, or that we have a lot of people who like this is what? When did this air? This was what
2017.
Okay, so this is spring of 2017, and maybe they didn't even watch Survivor yet at that time and didn't know the Robinson podcast lore. But what is it? The fourth episode of Survivor Game Changers. We are doing the live show in the now defunct Caroline's on Broadway.
Can't believe RHAP outlived Caroline's.
Yep, and we did the live show that night. And there's a viral Twitter clip that went around of when the everybody is in horror. It's almost like that clip from Survivor Gabon with Corinne and Maddie and
from
Sugar.
Survivor Gabon, yeah.
And everybody is horrified that one of the fan favorites, everybody's winner pick, Malcolm, is being shockingly voted out, and Mike Bloom is just pointing to the screen and smiling.
And I'll add laughing to that. I'll be generous. I'll add laughing. I was muncing a little bit. I'll admit. You never want to go full munce, but I munced a tad. I mean, listen, as I said on the Philippines podcast that I did with Jake, I love Malcolm. I actually love him as a character. I love the fact that, again, he has this...
I love him as a person, too.
Yeah, he has this bro look to him, but I think he has this fun bookishness, impishness to him that obviously carried over very much into Caramoan with the feisty underdog that he was trying to plan all of these big moves. I just love chaos a little more than I love Malcolm, and it was absolute chaos. I get a really bad like visceral response to when there is a big reaction around me. Like I was overjoyed to see how much people were reacting in unison. Like, isn't that awesome? Doesn't that say something about how great the Survivor community is, that we're all in a room together and we're just watching this absolute calamity play out in front of us, and everyone
slow motion car wreck. Yeah.
and everyone is just gasping and their heads are in their hands, and it is just, it's a miraculous sight to witness, probably even more punctuated by the fact that this clown is in the front row going, oh, look at that, everybody. And I'm tapping people on the shoulder being like, ooh, look at this.
Yeah. So we deserve to get Malcolm in his Jimmy T era, don't we?
Yeah, he's starting to get up there as well. And he is indeed part of the ballot, but it makes sense. Again, Malcolm, you could say from the Game Changers argument, he's the one that spearheads the Three Amigos Tribal Council, which has been proven both in the moment and in retrospect to not be as seismic of a moment. But I would also say Three Amigos might be, when we look back in Survivor history, might be one of the most, one of the first market examples of a live tribal council.
Yeah, that's a good point. Malcolm, what's Malcolm, like 37?
Let me look it up. He's close to that, I believe. Malcolm is 37 on the dot. You got it.
Pretty good.
Yeah, so he's still doing well with it. He did say in his quarantine questionnaire that he would be not an immediate yes as he was in this era, but also this is a little bit of a case though of, to your point about bringing back Suri after Heroes versus Villains, like, is this how we want Malcolm to bow out of Survivor in these circumstances, being the victim of JT
not
walking over to the other tribe?
Malcolm, come on.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about someone who did have that unfortunate outcome and did come back, and maybe can show to Malcolm, like, hey, if you come back after a disastrous showing in Game Changers, you might just become a winner of Survivor 2 times over. I was so excited to see Tony here.
This was kind of bittersweet that we got Tony back. It's only a couple of years after Cagayan.
Yeah.
So that Survivor Cagayan was what, 2014?
So it was 3 years later.
Yeah, so 3 years later, finally, the king is back. And I was so excited and so crestfallen to lose Tony, because the first 2 episodes were all in one night. It was a 2-hour premiere.
Because it was the big, they were building up to, I think it was the 500th episode of Survivor. And so they decided to put, I believe from an airing perspective, Game Changers might be the shortest season, because they also did a 2-hour merge episode as well. And so they only did it for like 12 weeks.
Yeah. So, yeah, just a bummer that we didn't get, even a week of like, Tony made it through night 1. Yeah. So, very sad. Turns out the spy bunker, not as good as the spy shack or the future spy nest.
Yeah, the sequel can sometimes let down a little bit, but it's the very rare case of the 3rd installment of the trilogy definitely rising above expectations. And yeah, I mean, this is also a case where, I don't know, this almost feels like in Tony's arc as a Survivor player, a little bit of the necessary point in his journey where, like, he came onto the beach and Sandra tried to get out ahead knowing that she was seen how she was seen. Tony maybe did a bit of the opposite. I mean, he still was Tony. He still immediately started running as soon as he hit the camp at Mana. But at the same time, I think everyone just grew super wary of Tony. They had just seen what he had done 3 years prior, and they did not want to allow that chaos into their lives. And so it was, after Sierra was voted out, it was an easy way to dispatch the king, but it then allowed him to go into Winners at War with this sort of blemish on his record to say, like, no, I'm not a perfect player. Don't worry. I'm going to build a ladder. I'm going to do nothing. You can trust me.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the reasons why Tony was able to gain a really good foothold early on that paved the way to his second win.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about someone who always accompanies Tony in all of his
Tony's running mate.
Because this is maybe when we start getting into the case of, like, it makes sense why they were cast for a returning player season, but maybe not a season called Game Changers, which again proves the point of they cast first, theme second, because Sarah Lucina was a really big force in the half season of Cagayan that she was in. Obviously, she had that storyline with Tony that eventually became Cops R Us. In the Swap Tribe, she was the lone person left over from Braun on her camp, but then that put her kind of in the swing vote position to the point where she was the president at the merge, and then things go where they do.
Right. Sarah plays a really great game. One last thing on Tony. This was a fun reminder that Tony's going to be on the Traders. So sometimes I forget that. It's like, oh, this is exciting.
And Tony's also on the ballot too. So
yes. All right. Well, Yeah, Sarah, I don't think I had a ton of hype. I feel like that the story about Sarah here that she says, like, the first time I played like a cop, now I'm going to play like a criminal. Like, that was her tagline.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
okay, like, would love to see it. Bet. Let's go.
Yeah, basically it was that she got too confident and she got too trusting in people. She thought that she had all the votes
Yeah.
clocked so that she could go anywhere she wanted in Cagayan, only to realize that the votes were on her.
And I believe Sarah was my winner pick in Survivor Cagayan. And this is
Mm-hmm.
one that I actually kicked myself of like, I think I'm trying to remember who my winner pick was for
Oh,
Survivor Game Changers. I'll
good
find
question.
it when we go through the list.
Yeah.
It'll come back to me. But this is the one I like. That was easy money right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it made sense that she, much like we talk about with a lot of these returnee seasons, right? Like she did respectable her first season, made it to 11th place, but not so much that she comes in with this big reputation as a massive player. She had some basic skills of what to do, but I will say she surpassed even those expectations. Again, I cannot speak highly enough about what Sarah was able to do. Now, look, did it make her leave the game with a lot of friends? Not necessarily, but this was a case where Sarah was able to make good with a lot of social capital that she accumulated and spend them wildly, mostly on advantages.
Mm-hmm. Did Sarah get through for Survivor Cagayan?
Sarah did not get through, and maybe at the point this is being recorded, I'll be told elsewhere that Sarah does want to come back. My impression is that, she almost didn't go out for winners at war because she had just felt so mentally detrimented from what happened in Game Changer. She was really affected
Yeah,
by the
but she's
fact.
done 2 seasons of the challenge since
Yeah,
then.
but that is, I mean, as I sure one of your co-hosts can tell you, the challenge is like night and day compared to playing Survivor. And so, I mean, Sarah being, the fallen angel as well. I think a lot of talk that Dwight and I had too is like, what more do we need to see of the
Yeah.
Sarah Lucina
No, I
story?
see her. I think her story is complete, and especially I think the last part of her story was the friendship with Tony, and where does that? So yeah, I feel like as a character, I feel like her story is done. But I'd be interested to see. I don't get the sense that there is a clamoring to see Sarah 4.0.
No, I did not detect that as of yet at the time that we are recording this podcast. Also, I did see who you picked for Survivor 34, Rob, as your winner pick. And spoiler alert, we've already talked about them.
Oh, who was it?
You picked Ozzy.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I wonder what I was thinking. I have to go back and listen of why I picked Ozzy. I guess I thought maybe that everybody's gonna be too distracted with everything going on. I
Yeah,
don't know.
maybe you thought it was like, well, it's been 11 seasons and he hasn't won yet, so you feel like all the other big players like Tony, Cerise, Sandra, JT are going to get taken out over him, and then maybe he'll do what he always wanted to do, which is just challenge Beast his way to the end and take home the
Mm-hmm.
victory.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and listen to my thinking there. I'd be interested to hear.
All right, well now we
I remember
really need,
thinking it was very clever.
yeah, well now we really need to crack into these two. Sierra Dawn Thomas,
Yeah.
Haley Ford. So, first off, we spoke about this in Cambodia, the surprising amount of season 30 players that were on the ballot, and maybe the discrepancy between production loving Worlds Apart, maybe the fandom not so
Yeah.
much. So, we bring back a couple people from Worlds Apart. I do not think anyone would have expected it to be these two, where Haley ends up becoming the first juror on Worlds Apart, and Sierra Dawn Thomas does make the finale, but I would say is definitely the most under-edited person in the end game.
Yeah. I remember that they did the Survivor Price is Right within like a
Yes.
year of this. And that was really when the fan favorite Sierra Dawn Thomas was born.
And then she became fan favorite game changer Sierra Dawn Thomas.
Fan favorite game changer Sierra Dawn Thomas. And I don't think that people were expecting much. She probably goes further than people would expect her to. But yeah, it's kind of wacky to have her here and call her a game changer. And then Haley, who's a fun personality and is a lovely person, this was even more bonkers that she ends up here.
I mean, the person that would agree with you chiefly would be Haley herself. I do
Mm-hmm.
recall there was in all the voluminous preseason coverage done. Haley's like, why am I here? I saw that's logo. Is that me? Am I a game
Mhm.
changer? How did that work? And I think again, speaking to what Jeff was trying to do in the preseason, he told Dalton Ross, Haley to me is the dark horse to win. I think Haley has everything you need to win this game. I think she's a great student of the game, really good with her words. Haley was labeled a no caller and in some ways lived up to it. She didn't pull the trigger in ways that I think she wishes she could, but she's absolutely a game changer and someone that I think if she can get out of the gate and get past some of the older school players, I think she will shock people with how she plays.
She did offer to get naked at a tribal council to prove she doesn't have an idol.
I believe that was also was that one of her first or one of her last tribal councils in
I
Game
think that
Changers?
might have been the tribal council she got voted out.
Yeah, the merge, right? When it was between her and Michaela.
And if that's not a game-changing move,
I mean, arguably, then you would bring back the winner of your season, who infamously got naked on
not
the
a
show.
tribal council.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But look, to be candid, I think both of these picks are checking a box that we have talked about consistently going back to the first All-Star season, which is this desire to sometimes have young, beautiful women on a Survivor season that maybe
especially of recent seasons.
exactly, especially from recent seasons. And again, like Sierra did make it to a finale, so she was around for a while.
Yeah. Also, this is maybe like a little bit of an issue here is that we brought so many people back, like in the late 20s, between Caramoan was, and we've talked about, fans versus favorites. There were not a ton of, not a lot to mine there from the fans. We have a couple of favorites there, but then in Blood versus Water, we had half returnees and their loved ones. So we really had, and we brought back a lot of people already from Cagayan for 31. So yeah, there wasn't really that much ripe news, and second chances was all returnees. So we end up with a couple of like wacky first time players here. I think just out of necessity of there weren't that many other options.
And the reason why we also have, I think, Probe's comments on record about Haley being a game changer is that I should mention, in a different world, Sierra Dawn Thomas is not on this cast. Because if you remember, the rumor is that Natalie Anderson, before she ends up going to Winners at War and becomes like the highest average finisher in Survivor history, was supposed to be on this, which does make sense.
I forgot all about that. What happened? She got a concussion?
Yeah, she got a head injury. I think it was a concussion. And so she was not able to be medically cleared. And so Sierra Dawn Thomas rolled her way into the game like a barrel.
Okay, so she was an alternate.
She was an alternate. Yeah, which does make sense. When I'm thinking about alternates that have come back for other returnee seasons, there are people that again pop a little bit, but not necessarily in a way that you'd be like, yeah, they've got to be on there, but it's someone you want to keep in the repertoire. I mean, I don't understand again why Haley would necessarily make it onto a cast over Sierra, but maybe she impressed them a couple of years ago when they were in Nicaragua.
Yeah. Are there any like notable snubs that we're not thinking of from that didn't get game changers that like in hindsight, like I'm trying to think of like who were the people from so probably not anybody that was like, especially when we're talking about the women. So I mean, I feel like almost everybody came back from Cagayan, right?
Yeah.
Then in San Juan del Sur, I don't know, like Jacqueline. I don't know, like who, like I don't think you're gonna bring back Missy or Baylor. And then in Worlds Apart, they already brought back a bunch of people.
Yeah, they wouldn't do Shireen for a third time in 4
maybe
seasons.
Mama C should have.
So,
this should have been her returnee spot.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And Mama C was considered, but for whatever reason, she was cut at the last second. And so I personally feel like, and maybe it was an age thing. Maybe they felt with like, especially the older school players they were bringing on, that they wanted to bring on a bit more younger blood to balance it out. And that's why you go with Sierra over a Mama C. But that's the slam dunk choice to me.
Yeah.
So suffice it to say, neither Sierra nor Haley on the ballot, but Mama C is.
Okay.
So this next group that I want to get into are people that are in the group of seasons we've talked about, but they appeared more recently in some form on Survivor Cambodia. So we have 2 people that were on Cambodia in Jeff Varner and Sierra Easton, But more interestingly, Rob, we have two people who were not voted on by America 2 years ago, but production said, we still want to see you back, Troy Zan and Brad Culpepper.
Okay. Where do you want to start, Mike?
Well, let's start with the factors we know here. Let's talk about Varner and Sierra Easton. And look, certainly Varner made a name for himself in a very infamous way on all of this. But I was not surprised to see him make this cast. And maybe I was, again, if you just look under the level of game changer.
Yeah.
But I think we forget around that time, production loved Jeff Varner.
They loved Jeff Varner. And you know what? And I too, like, somebody who came into Survivor when I did, like, I was super excited to meet Jeff Varner, who was like always like a mischief maker. And I think that that's probably more fun from, far away than when you see it up close. But there were definitely some red flags, I think, coming out of like Survivor Second Chances with Jeff, especially when you like go back and listen to some of like his exit press and things that he was talking about from people that he was not getting along with in that season. But I just think that the temptation there was that he's somebody who's always going to stir up trouble, and it backfires spectacularly on production here.
Yeah, 100%. And so, again, should not have been cast on the season, obviously will not be considered for any future seasons. But I do think, especially the way that like you hear probes talk about Jeff Varner is like, to your point, a little sneaky, a little underhanded. And even in Cambodia, where he only lasts 4 episodes, but I do think he was a big narrator as a part of that as well. He was someone that he's
very good in the confessional,
very good in the confessional. He was doing stuff like cross-tribal communication as well, trying to pull that off in the middle of challenges.
Yeah, he gave them a lot on the TV show, but that his desperation knew no limits in Survivor Game Changers.
Yep, we saw what he can do when he was cornered, and it was disgusting. So moving on to Sierra. Sierra, has a respectable middle finish in Cambodia. She winds up 10th or 9th, I think. Yeah, right ahead of Wigglesworth, right behind Steven, ends up getting idled out. But, I mean, why she's brought on here is what Jeff Probst mimetically yells when she's revealed at the Millennials versus Gen X reunion. She voted out her mom.
So I heard you and Uncle Kiwi talking about Sierra the other day. It got me a little pumped up for a Sierra 4.0, especially the idea of like in a future Blood versus Water season of her playing with her being a legacy.
Yeah, because it needs to be like when Eric came back for Fans versus Favorites and turned from a fan into a favorite.
Yeah, so I think that Sierra could be a returnee, if not, and like I've talked about on other podcasts. I would love to see Survivor 50 be more of a second chances, and then them do more of a legend season a couple of years down the line. But yeah, I would be interested and intrigued to see Sierra play again.
Yeah. So now we talk about the two guys that are left off of the season, and in retribution, they become 2 of the final 3 of this season. So starting with Troy Zan, I mean, I talked about this with Peridium. It made sense why he was on the Second Chances ballot. He is definitely one of the more well-remembered characters from One World. This Is My Island, probably being like one of the most remembered moments from that season, for better and for worse. But
people came back from One World.
It came at a really good time where it was about to undergo like a bevy of returnee seasons. They're like, to your point, we gotta pull him from somewhere. Here's this young hot cast of Survivor One World, and Troy Zan is the exact definition of that, I suppose. But I'll admit, in the moment, I was not particularly pleased. I didn't like Troy Zan a lot during One World, and for me, it was this attitude of like, we didn't vote you onto the season. Stop trying to make fetch happen. And unfortunately, maybe that kind of bore out in the edit, where he does make it to the finals, which as like a dyed-in-the-wool Survivor fan is something he wanted, but it was a little bit like, at what cost to your edit?
But I think that his edit in Survivor One World, where like he is such an antagonist to what Kim is ultimately trying to do, I think he's like, what he's pretty well liked by the people who he ends up playing with in Survivor Game Changers. Like, I think that there was not a lot of conflict around Troyzan, where I think that his first season really bore out that, like, ooh, he can't get along with anybody except for, Tarzan.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, that he was kind of built up, to your point, as kind of one of the conflict causers, especially once Colton left in one world. But he was more the calm than the chaos.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's more of like an overcorrection of like, hey, my problem was that I was like too antagonistic, and this time I'm going to walk it back, or this was a little bit more of the real Troyzan, and that the whole thing where Kim ended up, stabbing him in the back, that really set him off. But Troyzan, really sweet guy. But I don't think we need to see the Troyzan 3.0.
I would agree with that. I don't think we need to click him through on your ballot. Because I think that we sort of answered the question as well with Troyzan, right? Of like, okay, what would he do in different circumstances? What would happen if he made it to a finals? And the unfortunate answer is that he gave this like kind of heartwarming speech at the end of like, listen, I know I'm not winning, but thank you all for letting me play this game.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about his partner in crime here in Brad Culpepper, because I will admit I'm definitely someone who the first time I watched Blood versus Water, I was not a fan of Brad Culpepper, but have immensely grown to appreciate the entertainment value that he brought to Blood versus.
At the Game Changers finale that Brad Culpepper came out like with like this like little tiny like mustache that was like...
that he shaved right before the reunion happened. Because remember, I think Jeff still did the little like walkthrough of like, here we are, it's Studio City, but we're gonna make it look like the jungle for some reason. Here's the pre-jury, here's the jury, and here's the everyone in the finale. And like, I think Brad Culpepper still had full facial hair, and between that and the winner reveal, he shaved it down to go full video store clerk Joseph from Big Brother 26.
Yeah. But then he came out to do press, and then I think he didn't have anything. He was like, what are you talking about? I didn't have a mustache. Like,
and then there was also the infamous potato sack that he wore to the final tribal council as well. Brad Culpepper really showed a lot of his personality in his second time out, which I'm grateful for. Like, this is an example of, to your point earlier, why maybe you bring back an antagonist and see what else they could bring. Because, again, I think Brad was kind of personified back in Blood versus Water as, the straw that was stirring the drink, the guy that was bossing his tribe around and then was kind of overthrown by the people underneath him. Here, he's showcasing his love of interior decoration. Again, he's rocking all these weird fashion and facial hair trends. And then he also finds himself in a situation where he's on the outs and he basically has to win out. And he is the most recent example, besides Chrissy, of someone tying the all-time immunity challenge record.
Yeah, I mean, he does far better than anybody could have imagined, but I don't think we need more Brad for Survivor 50, in my personal opinion. I'd love to see Brad on, like, some other, like, Brad and Monica on The Amazing Race, I'm here for. Like, I feel like that, I don't know, maybe if not The Traitors, I feel like that out of all these reality shows that pop up with random reality TV people, I would definitely watch Brad on another show.
Yeah, Brad has that personality. I think that, again, how many jokes do we still make about Culpepper math? About 4 into 5, 4 into 9, and him messing up the numbers.
Yeah.
Like, his legacy lives on. F.U. Brad Culpepper. He's the recipient of one of the best memes that comes out of the 20s of Survivor. So I do think that Brad Culpepper, people have come around on him, especially recently. And he is on the ballot because he has expressed that he would want to come back again. I do agree it might be a bit of a long shot when push comes to shove, but I agree. I think you'd be interested to see. Just put him on HGTV. Put him alongside Kim Spradlin, actually. You know what? Have them do that show together.
Yeah. And, I think that the Culpepper sons, I feel like, are like of a certain age. If you ever did like another Blood versus Water and then you wanted another legacy of like have Brad come back with one of the kids.
Yeah, I think we just do Survivor the Next Generation and have everyone play with their children.
I think it's a fun idea.
Did we not get a test balloon back in Big Brother 25? Did we not learn our lesson?
Okay.
All right, last group that we are going to here, and I did not realize this until we lay it out, Rob. 6 people, over a quarter of this cast, came from the 2 seasons prior to Survivor Game Changers.
Yeah, we really, it was the story of the season. The Caramoan Four.
The Caramoan Four. And I will admit, listen, I think Ko Wrong and Millennials versus Gen X might be, up there with some of the best back-to-back seasons in Survivor history. So I'm not mad at it on paper. It is pretty wild, though, that, again, you got 4 people that appeared in the first 20 seasons of the show and 6 people that appeared in the last 2 seasons of the show.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I remember they filmed this like days after Survivor Ko Wrong had aired and months before Survivor Millennials versus Gen X had aired.
Right. So it was a lot of introductions. I know that Zeke and Michaela have told stories about how, like, they were voted out and then they were basically immediately asked, like, hey, would you want to come back again? They're like, yeah, sure. And so I think Zeke had, like, from the jury of Millennials versus Gen X to starting Game Changers, maybe had like 4 or so weeks of downtime, which is just wild. But let's go through these people, starting with someone who pinged very much on the radar after that Ko Wrong finale that came right into her perception on Survivor Game Changers, but does make it to the finale and finish respectably in 5th place. But Aubrey Bracco. And again, we talked about these people that we thought were going to be in danger early on. I think, Rob, you and I and a lot of fans thought Aubrey was dead to rights.
Yeah, she had just come right off of Survivor Ko Wrong, and she ends up being this person she should have won. And especially like at the time, there was a lot of like fervor of like that Aubrey was robbed and she was going to be she was the person that should have beaten Michelle and won Survivor Ko Wrong. But Aubrey, just like looking back at her Survivor career, and I know you saw that we just recently interviewed Aubrey for Talking with T-Bird. Yeah, Aubrey really did leave a mark. I mean, she was a game changer. I think that you
her legacy carries through to this day. When Mariah mentions her favorite player is Aubrey, it apparently causes Q to target her.
Yeah, I just think that she was sort of like really, the first of like a different archetype of like a woman who came across who was fun and smart, but also quirky, but also could like hold her own in the challenges. And I think that Aubrey is just a really fun character. And I definitely could see Aubrey on a Legends season down the road.
Yeah, we did not add her to the ballot at this moment because basically we ended up replaying the conflict of, okay, we have 1 spot left. Do we add Aubrey or Michelle? And we felt like Michelle, given the fact that she's appeared on reality TV more recently, and I think is more emphatically for going on the show than Aubrey. She got the nod here, but Aubrey will get another chance. In Edge of Extinction will probably get on as a wild card as well. And I agree. I think that Aubrey is somebody who has also changed a lot. Obviously has become a mother since she was mother back in 2016. And if she is up for it, I think could be really interesting, especially when she is not coming through this series of seasons where 32, 34, 38, she is known as like this big strategic presence.
Yep. Aubrey playing for a 4th time is not like something I have to see, but I definitely would be intrigued.
I agree. Let's talk about the person that she ends up sitting next to, not only in Ko Wrong, but also in 5th and 4th place at the reunion of this season. Let's talk about Ty, because Ty, again, game changer. I don't know, maybe him denying Scott.
Mike, he got the first Sia prize.
I think that's true, especially in retrospect. He's maybe the biggest game changer of it all, that he changed the way that fan favorite awards were given out for a brief period of time. But also, Ty definitely fits the bill as well for this guy had returnee written all over him. He was one of the biggest characters of the season. I talked about this in the Ko Wrong podcast as well. I don't think he's remembered as much, but was also a big player that season as well. Someone that was willing to find idols and play them or not play them. In one particular instance, he's going to find 3 more in the course of this season alone. And also just one of the most unique personalities that we have ever seen. And unfortunately, I don't know if, again, it's just circumstances or maybe the fact that they just came off of their season airing, but Aubrey and Ty, despite the fact that they make it to the finale yet again, much more understated edits compared to Ko Wrong.
For sure. Yeah. Ty, I think that you can easily like forget about him. I feel like throughout the middle of Survivor Game Changers, I feel like he has a big like beginning and certainly like a lot in the finale, but yeah, Ty kind of a quiet run in Game Changers the rest of the way. I don't know did they need Ty for Game Changers? I'm not so sure.
I mean, I think specifically if we look at these six and maybe Haley and Michaela as well under a different theme, if we look at those as second chances too, I think it absolutely makes sense to put him and Aubrey and these next two that we're going to talk about on. I
Hmm.
just think it's a matter of like, I think in that moment, yes, the Michelle versus Aubrey debate was the main thing to take away. But again, Ty was such a fan favorite that he got thousands of dollars from a random celebrity. And so
Yeah.
I think he was a slam dunk to return at some point in time. I think maybe in retrospect, actually, I think, he would probably say yes because this was the last time he could possibly return. But I do imagine if he was given the option of like, hey, come back for 34 or come back for like 40, he would probably choose 40.
I just feel like that we got everything there was to get out of Ty. He had such a complete story. I feel
Mm.
like in Survivor Wrong that I don't know if there was like another level to his Survivor story.
Well, for what it's worth, Ty is on the ballot. So we will see if people agree or disagree with you about possibly seeing a Ty 3.0.
Okay.
Next up, Debbie. And Debbie is a case of, again, I think somebody that would fall into this category of she's a character from the season that we want to see back again. It just so happens to be under a
Yeah.
season called Game Changers.
For newer Survivor fans, I feel like that Debbie was like the female Q. It was somebody who just created so much in the season that you wanted to see what they were going to say next. There was a lot of like, is this person for real? Is it like, what are they doing? And then that they were such a slam dunk, Debbie, to come back, and it doesn't go great the second time around.
Though she does have one of the best instances of I'm pissed until Liz Wilcox comes around.
Yeah. And so, and she's talked about it, we did a talking with T-Bird
Right.
with her. And I think she talked about that she was going through a life change in the same way I think Lil has talked about also. And so that maybe Debbie wasn't quite herself all through Survivor Game Changers, but that this is not a pick that you could second guess too much, even years later.
Yeah, I mean, I think Debbie also sort of proved why she was cast in the season, right? Sometimes these people come on and pull the Wentworth and surprise you. Sometimes people come on and play a completely different way than you expect, like JT. Debbie came with the label and did exactly what she was going to do, right?
But there was a lightness to Debbie in Survivor Wrong that we really don't see here in Game Changers, except in the presence of one John Cochran.
Exactly. He's the one to bring it out of Debbie when she is fortunate enough to be exiled and go visit him on the yacht. So Debbie was left off the ballot. I know she has expressed the desire to play, but I also think to your point about how we kind of have become unintentionally rich with these kooky characters, the wackadoodles, if you will, in the new era. I think, Debbie is someone that will, quote unquote, inspire other choices like a Nora, like a Carolyn, etc. That I think we're fine seeing those for the second time than Debbie for the third time.
Yeah. Debbie had a cameo on the Aubrey Talking with T-Bird.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
How's she doing nowadays?
It was quick. She had the parrot on her shoulder, and
oh, Debbie's gone full pirate now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, she's perfect for Survivor Pearl Islands when they bring that theme back. Well, we talk about a third time for Debbie. Let's talk about a guy who came on for his third time on a CBS reality show.
Yep.
Beast Mode Cowboy. So Caleb Reynolds shows up on Survivor Wrong as one of the beauties and nearly gets Judy chopped not out of the game, but out of existence when he undergoes, honestly, probably the closest anyone has come to death on Survivor during that absolutely staggering scene.
And Survivor said, get him back out here.
Well, I think it was, again, this manner of like, I cannot believe this is a guy who put his body on the line to the point of extreme exhaustion for salt and pepper. The way that Probst explains it in his interview with Dalton, he says, Caleb, that one baffles me. How would you ever say he's not a game changer? He was willing to risk dying to win. That's a game changer. There we go. Cut print.
Maybe Big Brother game changer.
I think Big Brother law changer in terms of the restraining order.
Yeah, I mean, when Caleb went out in Koh Rong, I think they put the card on the screen. It's like Caleb has made a full recovery and is looking forward to playing again.
Yeah, it was only a matter of time that they would play. That this was a matter not unlike Mike Skupin, honestly, where it was like, here was someone who had some momentum going, and Caleb didn't attend a tribal council before he was medevaced. And so it was a matter of he didn't even really get to play the game. And then he goes out in this incredible show of television that puts his life obviously on the line, and that he makes a full recovery. It's clear they want to have him back. Again, I think it was just a matter of timing that the next returnee season happened to be only a couple seasons afterwards, and happened to be now, ironically, I suppose Caleb is one of these people on this slide that maybe fills the title of game changer the most, considering that the story is from Cambodia onwards, they had to provide a source of potable water 24/7 to make sure nobody died from heat exhaustion.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree as well. Let's finish off with two of the people that got brought straight from Millennials versus Gen X. They sparkled in the eyes of the producers while they were watching them and said, you want to delay your ticket back home for a little bit, stay in Fiji, go play another season. And it's interesting because, listen, people at the time, I think, knew that these two would be involved in this season in some way, shape, or form. And so I imagine they were probably watching Millennials versus Gen X with that lens of, okay, what are they going to do to be a game changer? And look, your mileage may vary, but I would say these are definitely two of the standout characters among a cast of standout characters in Millennials versus Gen X.
For sure. I mean, I think that ends up being probably a little bit more surprising that Michaela ends up going out where she does in Survivor.
For 14th place.
Gen X. But I would also say that I feel like that's Michaela is a bigger character in Millennials versus Gen X than she is in Game Changers.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Michaela is somebody who kind of always has her back against the wall. If I remember correctly, she was a target both at the first vote and at the first merge vote. I think it was just maybe almost the exact opposite of what they did with Russell Hanson, Heroes versus Villains, where it's like, we don't really know you. We're going to get rid of you immediately because we kind of have relationships with other people. She does have that really nice scene with Suri where the two of them connect. And she, of course, does have everything going on with JT, where that's where I think that Millennials versus Gen X Michaela came out a little bit.
That's a little bit. Yeah, the moment with JT was a good one. And then, but she doesn't find the advantage, right?
Sarah snatches it from right under her feet.
And
she goes out in one of the most confusing tribal councils ever.
Right. But Michaela, like from watching her like on the challenge and specifically the Challenge USA, this last one, I mean, she is such a big personality.
Yes.
Like, I do think that her coming back to Survivor, I do think she would bring a lot to a season.
And I completely agree. And so did Ali Lasher. That's why she's on the ballot. And I will admit, it fully was because of the Challenge USA season 2, where even in her first challenge season, she was one and done. It was basically what they tried to do in Game Changers of like, you're a new person, you're scheming too much, we got to get rid of you. But she really entertained me in so many different ways in USA 2 that I really would like to see her back for time number 3.
And then for Zeke, I'm pretty sure Zeke has said that Zeke does not want to play Survivor again.
But and understandably so.
Forget Survivor. Zeke was blocked by the Survivor Instagram. Can we get Zeke unblocked from Survivor Instagram?
Yeah, let's start with that. But it makes so much sense why Zeke is someone that would get brought back. I think Zeke is obviously, as someone who came from the world of comedy and writing, a really fun storyteller. He obviously stands out as the guy who came in with the mustache and the Hawaiian shirt and makes fire in that first episode. But also, he was one of the gamiest people of the season as well.
Yeah, I mean, Zeke loves reality TV. I remember I met Zeke in, like, I think it was 2012. I went to like a blogging conference and met Zeke there. And Zeke wanted to write blogs for robhasawebsite.com. And so that was my first encounter with Zeke, who just loves Survivor, loves reality TV, great sense of humor. That we're lucky we got Zeke. For the year that we had him, but I don't think Zeke is coming back.
Nope, definitely not. Zeke's life is fine. He is now married to his wonderful husband, Nico, and so he is doing well, though. Who knows? As you said, he's a fan of reality TV, so maybe he'll get thrown onto another show like Worst Cooks in America, as an example.
Or The Traitors.
Could be on The Traitors as well. So, yeah, so these two end up coming back to back. And it does bring up an interesting question, Rob, is that, again, more than a quarter of this cast is made up of people from the last 2 seasons before Game Changers.
And
Now,
that's the biggest punchline of all, Mike, that we could spend all this time talking about who should come back from Survivor, and, you know, it ends up being all people from Survivor 47, 48, and 49.
so it's a good question, though, is that obviously 50 is a big number, and a lot of people have been talking about, you know, will they cast the net wide and try to get someone from the first season on, or do you think they'll do it in a way that they've done Cambodia and Game Changers and say, oh yeah, we're going to really try to pull from the last 5 seasons of the show majorly?
I feel like Second Chance, is a good is instructive to look at, where you had like, okay, a Kimmy and Varner who came back from, like, and Kelly Wigglesworth, and it's like, okay, let's get a couple of throwbacks, but more of it is going to be, you know, heavily recency biased.
Yeah, so we shall see. But this is trying to look into the secret sauce that was casting for Survivor Game Changers. I can read off, Rob, including yourself, a list of players that were allegedly considered and or cut for Game Changers, if you'd like.
Would love to.
All right, so let's talk about the cut people first. These are people that were considered, but ultimately decided not to get let on by production. We have from Survivor Cagayan, Alexis Maxwell, former RHAP guest.
A true game changer.
Mama C, as mentioned before.
Yeah, baby.
Chelsea Meisner, finalist from Survivor One World.
One of the only people from One World they didn't bring back, and somebody who went on to have like a very good reality TV career.
Yeah, she said, if they don't want me on CBS, I'm going Bravo's way. Of course, there was a story about how I believe Danny Boatwright was contacted, but only wanted to do all winners, and she lucked out in that regard 6 seasons later. Okay. John Cody and John Mish are Blood versus Water Johns, both considered, but ultimately not brought on.
Okay.
I think it makes sense because, again, from like a male perspective, as you were kind of talking about with this season, and carries over a lot into All Stars, where it felt like they wanted the people that they got, and so there wasn't a lot of room for guys to kind of wiggle their way on.
Yeah, it's almost like, and Akiva mentioned this in Blood versus Water, but it's almost like, okay, you have your fantasy team, and you got your first, like, your big draft picks, and it's like, all right, I got to fill out the rest of the roster here.
Yeah, exactly. So they end up sort of getting benched or sent over to another team in the case of Chelsea. Jonathan Penner, allegedly.
No, I can confirm this. I remember back in that spring of 2017, I remember like getting texts from Penner. And maybe, I don't know if we spoke on the phone, but I remember him basically saying that, they were calling, they were asking about if he wanted to do it or not, and that we were talking a little bit about whether or not he wanted to go back for a 4th time.
Did he want to in that moment? I know he has said now that he's fine coming back.
I honestly, I don't remember if he said he wanted to do it and they cut him, or if he ultimately backed out.
Well, here's the rare Cagayan returnee that was not. LJ ends up getting cut. And LJ, I think, is in line with Sarah of like, again, game changer, maybe not, but somebody from Cagayan that I could see returning.
So, I just feel like they were like grasping at straws a little bit here of like, you know, they were making a lot of phone calls. Like, I think if I really was like, hey, like, this is it, I'm ready.
Of course, Marty Piombo, Mr. Farty himself.
I know. Steven was making me sad the other day when he talked about with the Heroes versus Villains that, you know, probably Marty Piombo, we're never going to see him again.
He's on the ballot. Look, we'll try to make it happen from a fandom perspective. But yeah, that dose of reality was unfortunately not very welcome. But someone who is put on the ballot that from a more recent season, Mike Holloway, was apparently in consideration for Game Changers. Does make a lot of sense. I do wonder if JT declined, would Mike be his direct replacement?
Yeah, I remember hearing that he was in the mix for Game Changers to come back, and I don't remember exactly what the circumstances were.
Allegedly, Monica Culpepper was considered and cut. Do you think it's a case where, you know, her and Brad did not want to do the same season together again? Do you think it was
I don't know how young their kids were at that particular point, but they could have been like a Robin Amber ahead of their time, like a Robin Amber from season 40, not the Robin Amber that I played with.
I mean, Monica does end up showing up on the season later on anyway.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, after going from the on-site alternate in Heroes vs. Villains, Natalie Bolton is unfortunately cut before even being considered for the cast of Game Changers.
Oh, that would have been fun. A fun spot to bring her back.
Then, of course, we have, again, you talk about how Ko-Rong was running hot in terms of this casting pool. Dr. Obama, Peter Bagenstos, is apparently considered.
What?
Yeah, that's and it's interesting. Kirsten said that she kind of got, I mean, this guy was voted off right before the merge. He kind of had this storyline, right, where he thought he was the big leader, only to turn out that he gets humbled.
I mean, I think he could have been fine to come back, but that's pretty wild.
Joining Chelsea is her fellow One World finalist, Sabrina, who, again, we're sort of on this streak of Sabrina being like, I don't want to come back, but you keep asking me, so I guess I'll say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, someone who does come back from Winners at War in Sophie Clark was apparently in consideration and cut.
Interesting. They cut Sophie?
You know what? I think it makes a lot of sense because I would imagine, and we talked about this more with Heroes versus Villains, that they were kind of casting some pseudo rivalries on. It would make sense to put her and Ozzy on the same season, no?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
The Dragon Slayer and the formerly slayed dragon.
Yeah. I have a hard time thinking that Sophie is passing at this point in time, but yeah.
She didn't decline. I think she was just considered. People who did decline, looks like Sydney from Ko-Rong ended up declining. Of course, we talked about this in the Fiji podcast that Earl apparently went pretty far along in the casting process, but ultimately declined due to work obligations. I know that Greg Buis was asked for Cambodia. Apparently, they pinged him again during Game Changers, and he said no. Both Joey Amazing and Kelly Wentworth felt it was too soon after Game Changers. They waited a few seasons before appearing again in Edge of Extinction. And then there is a rumor that apparently Colleen Haskell was rumored to be asked and obviously declined.
How do they know?
I don't know. These Survivor fans, they might have been tracking her landline at the time. Yeah. They could have found where she lived.
Yeah. Imagine Colleen Haskell came back for Survivor Game Changers.
I mean, I think what they like to do with these seasons, if they can help it, right, is like bring on somebody from Borneo for every full returnee season. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They couldn't do it, obviously, in Heroes versus Villains because of Richard Hatch, but that's what they intended.
Imagine Colleen Haskell's like, look, I haven't had anything to do with Survivor for 17 years, but Game Changers, okay.
Yeah,
put me in.
I heard about a
Beast
legacy.
Mode Cowboy, I'm in.
Yeah, I heard about this legacy advantage. I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need more advantages in the game. Put me on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that does it for... Oh, and I guess a couple of other people that were considered. Abby Maria and All Worlds Apart people. Again, we continue to scrape a little to the bottom of the barrel right here. Apparently, So Kim was considered first boot of Survivor Worlds Apart for Game Changers.
Wow.
Just goes to show that anyone, Rob, can be a game changer.
Anybody can be a game changer. Okay, well, we'll see what they come up with for Survivor 50.
Yeah, we shall see. Tomorrow, we move into a really interesting period in Survivor history because, Rob, we're a little bit in uncharted waters here. We will have one more returnee season, which you're going to join me to talk about in a little bit in Winners of War, but Game Changers was the last time that any non-winning players could return for a Survivor season. And so we're going to be talking about seasons where basically nobody has come back. And so I think the focus is honestly going to shift. I really enjoy a lot of modern Survivor casts, especially in the new era. I think, unfortunately, for those that like to come and listen to these podcasts and be like, great, this is a person who, got their unjust boot and I want to see them come back. They're very underrated. I think this is the period of time when we start to put on the meta hats a bit more. And the Facebook hats. And we start to say, who are some people that the show would legitimately consider bringing back over these are people that we would want in our heart of hearts to come back?
Well, I think this next era that you're going to start mining of 35 through 39, I do think that there is a lot of fodder here for people. I feel like the over-under here for this next chunk of Survivor history, I think 4.5 people, is the over-under for how many people from this part of Survivor history will be brought back.
So is your assumption that it's going to be 10 new era, assuming a 20-person cast, and then
I'd say 10-ish, yeah.
10-ish, and then 5 from this group, and then 5 from seasons 1 through 34, basically.
If you had to lock me in for something, that's what my prediction would be.
So we are locked in tomorrow to start off this new stretch of Survivor history with Survivor Heroes versus Healers versus Hustlers. No matter what the theme may be, it's a cast that contains a lot of interesting people. Obviously, a unprecedented and game-changing in and of itself win in the form of Ben, but plenty of people along the way. I'll be discussing it all with Lindsay Wilson
Oh, that's
tomorrow.
fun.
Rob, I'm intrigued. I mean, again, you talk about going into this much larger pool. Who from this next season would you want to put on your personal short list?
Well, if Chrissy wants to play again, I think that would be great. Devin is somebody who Lauren Rimmer was somebody who at the time was really, and she kind of got forgotten to Survivor history like very quickly. But I think that like in the immediate fallout of that, Ryan, I think, is somebody who was interesting. Dr. Mike.
Again, we're going to have a lot of people to choose from. And in the true Heroes, Healers, Hustlers fashion, there might...
And Desi is somebody who, when we talk about where, like, Michaela really enhanced basically her Survivor resume, really got enhanced by appearing on the Challenge USA.
Yeah, so we shall talk about all of that tomorrow. And in true HHH fashion, I may have a twist up my sleeve that we will institute moving forward, a la the fire making challenge. Get your flints out, everybody. But Rob,
Survivor HHH, Mike, my final appearance on Survivor.
Wow. All right, because you were doing the challenges right before the finale.
Look for me in the finale.
Yes, I believe, didn't Jeff say, yeah, like, there's Cesternino?
There's Cesternino, like, doing challenges.
That was just a long series of...
Andrea and Cochran, I believe.
Yeah, see, Andrea loves Survivor. Even after participating in Game Changer, she came back and was participating in challenges.
That's right.
Right out there the season afterwards. With Rob, you brought the fire this podcast, as always. It'll only be a brief period of time before we're chatting again about Winners of War, but anything you'd like to plug in the meantime?
No, just Big Brother 26 days in Survivor. Big Brother 26. There's a lot more days than that, but we're cooking.
We are absolutely cooking. And tomorrow...
And join us for the Summer of Survivor every Wednesday.
Yes, myself and Rob and Shannon Gus, we are doing wild and wacky miscellaneous things. And we actually...
if you love Survivor Game Changers, boy, do we have a season for you to listen to.
Yeah, check out our Celebrity Survivor Brand Steel season, where we simulated a season of Survivor Game Changers with Celebrity Survivor fans. And listen, the deadlock rule may not have been invoked in the season proper, but it certainly was in this fictional season. So check that out, as well as, of course, the Survivor 50 wish list, which returns tomorrow with Healers, Hustlers with Lindsay Wilson. Until tomorrow, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.